Hi again, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of The Restaurant Show. This is episode number 7. I want to thank you very much for taking time to listen to this podcast. I hope that you had fantastic holidays. First of all, I want to wish you a fantastic 2015 for yourself personally and for your restaurant business. I hope that you have the health and energy to achieve all the dreams that you can conceive for yourself. So anything that you want to reach, anything you want to achieve, I sincerely hope that you go out and you try to grab life by the throat and make sure that you go and you hustle and you try to achieve those dreams. So I hope that you had time to enjoy, like I said, some time over the holidays, took some time with family and friends to recharge your batteries. Don't forget that, yes, it's one thing to hustle and work hard, but it's also very important to be able to take time to recharge and refill those batteries, and also to take time to reflect on 2014 and how did that go for you? What kind of a year was it? I know for a lot of people, the restaurant industry was very hard in 2014. Sales were down for most people. A lot of restaurant closures. Obviously, as always, a lot of restaurants opening because everybody thinks they can do it better than everybody else, but also a lot of restaurant closures. So are you further than you were a year ago? Have you thought of that? Is your business any better? Whatever the aspect is, it could be sales, but it could also be just the execution and the way the restaurant is going. Was it easier for you than the year before? If not, then maybe you need to change something, right? So you should make a plan for 2015. If you're not where you want to be, make a plan. Even if you are where you want to be, still make a plan to make sure that you keep the progress that you've made and that you can maybe go even further. Now, obviously, doing the same things that you did last year will get you in the exact same place, right? So if nothing's changed the last 12 months and you haven't changed anything, well, you're probably in the same spot. I know a lot of restaurateurs, a lot of operators, a lot of managers that are still in the same spot than they were a year ago. Time flies, especially in our business. It flies so quickly. We don't have the luxury of waiting. And to be honest, I'm pretty sure you're aware of that, but your sanity depends on it, right? If you don't want to go crazy, you need to have a restaurant that performs better, staff that's more implicated in the business, better sales, more loyal customers, a simpler, more efficient way of working on the business. So find systems that work for you, whether it's with HR, cost controls, equipment, marketing, leadership, developing the team, hiring. You definitely need systems to help you manage better. You are not a one-man army. Even though you work like a superhero, you need some help sometimes. And to be honest, if I can help you, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd love to help you make 2015 your best year ever. So if you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at info@rbbsolutions.com. info@rbbsolutions.com. Without any further ado, let's get this first episode of 2015 going right now. Okay, welcome back. So a pretty mellow song considering how serious our subject is going to be today. As I mentioned a little bit earlier in the intro, 2014 was a tough year for restaurants. Generally speaking, the industry was about 5% down in sales compared to 2013. If I look across the board from even larger chains, but a lot of businesses I've worked with. Now, obviously, there's been a few articles, at the end of the year, newspapers like to recap a lot of articles or different websites online that you see on social media like to recap the year and ask restaurants, what happened and what went wrong. And many restaurants come up with the same excuses as to why they struggle or even as to why so many of them shut down and closed down. And some of the excuses that they come up with, which are pretty much always the same as one of them, is there are too many restaurants. So a lot of restaurant people say, depending on the city, but in some cities where there's a lot of restaurants opening, that there should be permits to allow them a chance to strive, and so there's not so much competition. So they say basically you should only be able to open a restaurant if one shuts down, and so on and so forth. So I'll tell you in a few minutes why I disagree with all these excuses, but that's the excuse they give. So there's too many restaurants, and it's not fair for them to try to compete with so many restaurants. Another excuse that they give is taxes and fees are too high. So there's too many taxes, there's too many fees put on restaurants, and this makes it too hard for them to be competitive and to be able to make money. Another reason that they give is that people don't go out as much as they used to. So on top of it, there's too many restaurants, and then people use their discretionary income in a different way, apparently. Another thing is people don't respect their reservation. So they make a reservation online or on the phone, and then apparently now the new thing is that people reserve in 3-4 restaurants, and then they never even warn the restaurant and don't show up. There was an article I read right before Christmas. One restaurant had opened up for one group, and that group wound up never showing even. So they were closed that day, and they decided to open up for them. And eventually that group didn't even bother to show up or to call. And another restaurant said they had 100 covers, basically 100 reservations, 100 covers that never showed up in the month of December. So that affects their business, and that's the reason why they're struggling. Another reason that they give is that there's not enough good labor, or they can't keep the good employees because there's so many restaurants that people quickly move to different restaurants and don't stay with them. And they feel that it's hard for them to have staff that will help them perform at a high level and make money. Now, if you allow me, I would like to look at these reasons and why I think they, for the most part, are wrong. So for the first one, too many restaurants is the excuse that's quite often given. Well, let's be honest. It's an open market, okay? Do your thing, right? Execute properly and provide an amazing experience, and you'll be recession-proof. Yes, there are too many restaurants. Okay, it used to be that a subpar restaurant could cut it because people like to go out, and they wouldn't be too fussy. Now there's so many restaurants that we all haven't tried that if I'm not impressed the first time, I'll most likely just never go back. Okay, below average experience, don't cut it anymore. And most restaurants offer just that. Most restaurants offer you an experience that's okay, a server that's not too knowledgeable because he hasn't been pushed to learn more or he hasn't been questioned, by his management team, whether in a test or in person, to make sure that he's ready to be on the floor serving guests. He doesn't know what's in the food, whether it be for allergies or just because people are curious, right? So your job is to offer me an above average experience because money is hard to come by, and people spend a lot of money in restaurants. I mean, nowadays, if you go to not even super high end, but just like a decent restaurant, you're paying, $9, $10, $11, $12 for a drink. If you're going to high end places, I was in supposedly the best restaurant in Toronto recently. It was $16 a cocktail. Fantastic cocktail. But that's pretty much an hour, almost an hour of work for as an average for most people. An hour and a half if you're making minimum wage, and maybe half an hour for people that are making decent money. But that's still a lot of work in their regular life for people to go out and buy a drink. Then imagine the food. So people think because they open it that and the restaurant is there, that people should just be happy. Well, you know what? If I'm spending a day's worth of work on a dinner, I expect to get quality for what I'm spending the money on. Okay. Think of it this way. When my dad tells me about how great hockey players were back in his day, he tells me, they were the days of Maurice Richard and Jean Béliveau recently passed away. It tells me they worked harder. They were paid nothing, and that was real hockey. Then I look at old tapes, and I realize that the game's gotten incredibly fast. The goalies have much better technique than they did 30 years ago. Well, they had almost no technique, 30 years ago. I think most of his heroes will not stand out in today's hockey. Okay, because the game has evolved and people are more demanding. The game is faster than ever. The equipment is better than ever, and there's more and more technique in the game than it used to be. A lot of feel and play from your heart. But nowadays, there's so much technique into it, and they spend so much time on systems and stuff like that. So the same thing. What used to be what used to be an acceptable experience will no longer bring me back in a restaurant. People have gotten very educated about wine, about food, about beverages. Charging premium prices for average service or average food or a boring wine list or an average cocktail, it makes you look like a poser. Okay, you don't look like a superstar. It makes you look like, and a lot of restaurateurs are feel like they're entitled because they have the business, and that's what the market charges. Well, the market charges that when the quality is there, whether it be in service, whether it be in food and wine. I talked about that restaurant where they charge $16 a drink. Well, I was greeted by a super professional person at the door. The bartenders, because we sat at the bar, were fantastic, and everybody wanted to make sure we had a good experience. And you could tell the level of professionalism that was in that place. So I could understand why they were charging those kinds of prices and why they were full as well, because the restaurant was packed on a Tuesday night, and we had to go in at 10:30 to get a seat at the bar. Now, think about it. Everybody can cook really well these days, and everybody knows their shit about wine and food and cocktails. You need to stand out if you want to survive and maybe even grow. So when you tell me that there's too many restaurants, yes, there are a lot of restaurants, but there are a lot of bad restaurants that feel like the field should be regulated for them to be able to survive. Well, you just want us to pay for your inadequacies. Okay, if you can't stand out on your own, and if you can't make people be raving loyal customers, maybe you shouldn't be in business, and maybe there's a reason why your business is suffering. And communism is where they would regulate how many restaurants there are. We live in a free market. It's called free enterprise, and you need to work on standing out and making sure that the experience you provide is worth it and that people are happy with the money they spend with you, not the other way around. Now, second reason, taxes and fees are too high. And I gotta be honest with you, yes, there are a ton of costs associated with running a restaurant, but your competition has to deal with the same cost. So it's a level playing field, right? You don't have fees that your restaurant next door doesn't have to pay. Everybody's got to go by the same standards. You need to find out how you can have your numbers, right? You need to know your numbers on a daily, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. Getting your numbers on the 5th of the month for last month won't help you, okay? It's too late to fix anything. If you get your numbers January 5th for December and you say my labor was too high, well, December 15th was when you could have done something about that. January 5th, and now you're already, digging into January, and you need to look at this month. So the best time for you to control your numbers and to know your fees or whatever it is that you have to deal with is currently now, compared to the sales that you have right now, so you can have a reaction, so you can make sure that if it's you need to cut hours, then that's done. If you need to, whatever it is that you need to do, you need to be able to find your numbers easily by yourself. Can you calculate your labor costs on a napkin by yourself? And some people say, well, I have my system who does that. Okay, the system is a nice help, and it's a nice tool to have, but if you don't understand where that number comes from, and you don't understand how it affects your business and what you need to do to change it, it's not going to change on its own. Okay, so you need to be able to have, if you want to survive in the restaurant industry in 2015, you need to be able to know what your labor costs, your food costs, what your numbers are, where what the percentage of food versus the percentage of liquor, wine, and beer sold is, and how that affects your business, and how you can easily calculate that. I'll give you a huge tip, something that I do with most of my consulting clients. You need to learn to do reverse engineering. Okay, this way you can take your sales and find out what you're allowed to use labor-wise, what you're allowed to order, so you're efficient and you don't have a ton of money sitting in inventory, and you have enough to serve the guests that you'll have, okay? This way you're not hoping, you're planning. So you need to reverse engineer your costs. So this way, instead of hoping that you hit those numbers, well, here's what we're allowed to spend. Here's how we're going to build the schedule. And maybe, yes, our business is very alive and there's a lot of changes day to day. So give yourself the tools to be able to react and offer the proper experience. But start from a sales-based approach and reverse engineer the thing, and that's going to help you control your cost and not wonder about taxes and fees being too high. So reason number 3 that most restaurant owners give is that people don't go out as much anymore. Well, I got to ask you, how's their experience? What value do you offer them for the money they spend? You have one job, and that's to make sure that they're happy about the money they spend when they visit you. Now, let me repeat that for you, okay? I didn't say you had to be the best chef and have 45 flavors on a plate and be super expensive because it looks cool, or have the best decor, or whatever your business is, whatever your restaurant is, you have one job. Every guest that come into your restaurant, you have to make sure they feel good about the money they spent when they visited you. If you don't think about that and you don't think about service in that way, then there's a reason why you're struggling, and there's a reason why your restaurant is not doing as well as you want it to be. Okay? Most people are happy, doesn't cut it. Let me tell you a little story. And they're going to be an example about expensive experiences, but it's the same principle on a $10 meal. I used to visit a restaurant years ago where I'd been highly recommended, and it cost me $400 the first time I went there. I got choked up from the first bite I took because it was so good. I couldn't believe how fantastic it was. And the server was so attentive. And then the sommelier came by, and I told him what I was looking for, and I couldn't afford to spend the kind of money I wanted on the wine I wanted. But he found something similar for a very decent price, and the entire experience from top to bottom was fantastic. I talked about it for every day for a week after I went, and I think I went back 4 times that year. And I'm not, I don't go $400 meals all the time, but my experience was so fantastic that it was worth saving money to be able to go there a couple of times a year. I've also, about 3-4 years ago, wound up having a Christmas night off after I worked part of the day, and my girlfriend and a friend of ours, we basically wound up at 7:00 Christmas night with nothing to do because we hadn't made any plans because we were all working, and with nowhere to go. So we started looking for a restaurant that we could visit. Obviously, all the good restaurants we wanted to visit were either closed or fully booked. So eventually, after driving around for an hour, we found a place that was open, and we went in. And when I called, actually, before we went in, they said, yeah, we have room. No problem. We have a table for 3. Please come on in. And from there, we walked in and proceeded to have pretty much the worst restaurant experience any of the 3 of us ever had. From having the server remake my girlfriend's martini 3 times because she ordered a dirty Bombay martini and got a dry Grey Goose martini. And she tried to explain to the server that we see the bartender making the martini with the Grey Goose. So no, it's not Bombay, and no, it's not dirty. So it took 3 or 4 attempts before she got a drink right, or at least Bombay with some, dirty in it. I had to find a bottle of wine we ordered in the cellar because our server could not find it. The food was atrocious, to say the least. It was very, very average for the kind of restaurant that we visited. And then at the end, the server, he was telling us about his studies in architecture, and I asked him about the serving career. And he's talking at that point to 3 career servers / managers. Then he proceeded to tell us how it was a horrible job and you had to be a loser to do that. So he was studying to do something else with his life because, pretty much you have to be a retard to want to work in the restaurant industry long term, which the 3 of us sitting at the table did full time. So, and that dinner cost about $250. So, and it was supposedly a high class, high end restaurant. So compared to my experience with the first restaurant I told you about, it's not the amount of money. I almost fought with the server at the end because he was so cocky and, basically had a slight argument with him. Now, it doesn't matter how much money you spend. It's not the amount of money you spend. It's how you feel about that money. The first restaurant I told you about, I felt like $1 million from the service to how they made us feel to what the food was like. The entire experience from top to bottom was fantastic. Now, the other one was pretty much the worst case scenario, but there was nothing to make me feel good about that experience that night. Do you make them want to come back, even if their budget says they shouldn't? Like that first restaurant I told you about, I went back 4 times. I had to save money for it. Some nights I went and I probably shouldn't have gone, but I just wanted to go so bad. Okay? Most people think, X percentage of my clientele, most of my clients of our guests are happy or satisfied. It's just a small percentage that's not. Well, first of all, if you think that it's just a small percentage because of the comments you read online, then you're wrong. Because the comments you read online is a small part of people that were dissatisfied in your restaurant. I don't care if you have 20 positive comments and 3 negatives on TripAdvisor, and you say, well, look, 20 out of 3, most people are satisfied. No, most people that weren't satisfied didn't go and write a review. It's easy to go write something positive when you're excited. You know what? When I don't like it, that restaurant I told you where we spent money and we had a horrible experience, I wasn't even interested in wasting a second of my time to give any kind of feedback. Okay? I didn't want to go there. So most people are not going to complain when they have a bad experience. When you look at negative comments, it's going to give you an idea of what people are dissatisfied with in your restaurant. But keep in mind that most people will not complain. Even though you may feel like there's a lot of people online complaining, most people will not. So you're not judged by the 20 positive comments that are there or your friends that come in and tell you it's fantastic in your restaurant. Don't aim for that. That's why you're struggling. You are only judged on the worst possible experience you offer. What I mean by that is that what's the worst that can happen? So if you look at how your staff is trained, how your hostesses or people are trained about greeting the door, or how the kitchen is set up to put to bring out the food in a decent amount of time. Well, if it's possible for me to be forgotten at your door because the entire team is not trained to answer the door, then that's a horrible experience, right? Because I could stand there for 10, 15 minutes with nobody coming to greet me. Or I could sit at a table with nobody coming to greet me, and I can actually get up and walk out, because we see that in restaurants, right? People having to walk out because nobody's greeted the table. Well, that means there's a lack in the system. There's a lack in training. There's a lack in whether it be the schedule, whether it be who's responsible for greeting tables, whatever the reason is, okay? It means there's a problem in the experience. If it can take 45 minutes to an hour, and I understand sometimes it can happen with your kitchen where they get clogged up. It happens once in a while. That's one thing. If it happens on a frequent basis, then there's a problem, right? So if it's possible for a dish to take 35, 45, 55 minutes, an hour to come out of your kitchen, there's an execution problem. Whatever the level, whatever section in your restaurant can affect the guest experience, well, that's what you need to look at. You're only judged on the worst possible experience you offer. I've seen restaurants that I work with where people are talking at the staff, or talking at the bar or the coffee station, and there's people at the door, and they won't even look at them. There's no reaction towards the guests at all. And then I go to the owner, and I'm like, it's because it's not part of the culture. It's because it's not something you reinforce. Yeah, but I went and I greeted the door. I don't need you to greet the door as an owner. I need you to make sure the entire team, I don't care if it's a dishwasher, sees somebody standing at the door and the server, maybe there's only one server on the schedule, and they're stuck with a table making a payment or something. Well, that person needs to go to the door and be like, we'll be with you in a minute. Let me make sure that we can sit you down. You know what I mean? There's no excuses to make for how you treat people. Okay, I don't care how hard times are. I don't care what happened. If somebody walks in your restaurant, somebody should greet them right away. If somebody sits down, somebody should hit that table within 2-3 minutes. It's unacceptable for the cost of acquiring a new guest in your restaurant, or how struggling, how hard it is to run a restaurant, how struggling restaurants are these days. I walked out of a restaurant recently. I'd never done that. I sat in a restaurant here in my little village that I go to all the time, and a server eventually, after 10 minutes, he vanished, and I know it's the time where they go for their staff meal, and the person that replaced him was never told. I sat there for 15 minutes and decided, you know what, I am not spending my money in here right now because you're not respecting me as a guest. And restaurants do that every day, and then they have the gall to say people don't go out as much anymore, and they're not willing to spend, and there's too many restaurants, and when they can't even nail the experience properly. So let's be realistic, okay? You're only judged on your worst possible experience. And if you don't understand what that means, or you're not sure where to look at, get in touch with me, and I can definitely help you easily point out what it is. And I can, I don't want to extend this section forever, but I can give you a few examples of how you can judge compared to your, competitors, or even to yourself, but how you can spot what the worst possible experience is in your restaurant. And when you start working from there, then you reinforce the worst possible experience to make it acceptable, to make it exceptional. Okay, restaurants that do exceptionally well is because their worst possible experience is better than most restaurants' regular experience. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's something you need to focus on. And if you need my help to Figure out what it is. Get in touch with me. I'll gladly help you. And I'm serious. Now, reason number 4 that restaurants are struggling, as according to most restaurants, is that people don't respect their reservations. Now, I'm from Montreal, and this year there's been a huge thing about that, and people have started Twitter accounts to call out people by their name. I've seen restaurants of people I know recently, even before Christmas this year, calling out ladies by their name because they didn't show up with a group and didn't respect the reservation. There's a whole thing about people should have to give a credit card number to be able to make a reservation, and how can we stop this madness? And people are so disrespectful, and guests are horrible. First of all, 95% of people respect their reservations. Okay? Let's say 90 if you want to be, aggressive on that number. But it's not true that most people don't respect the reservation. Yes, there's a small group of people. You know what? It happens. It's the nature of our business. Deal with it. Okay? I know right now there's restaurant owners that are going through this. They want to, get through that speaker and grab me by the neck. Well, you should deal with it. Don't forget why you're here. I feel like a lot of restaurateurs, a lot of operators, a lot of managers forgot this year or in the last couple of years and why they're here. It's hospitality. Okay? We're not here to pump your ego. We're not here to make you feel good about yourself or to see how fantastic you are because you learned to put 3-4 ingredients together. Nobody gives a crap about that. People go out so they can feel good. They want to spend their discretionary income to have a good time, to forget about life for a while. Okay? It's not about you. Too many restaurants right now think it's about them. It's not. Okay? Yes. Do some people suck, like as guests? Yeah. Okay, but most don't. And most of them respect your business. So the whole thing about freaking out over, I mentioned before, this restaurant said they lost 100 covers over a month in December, which is the busiest month for pretty much every restaurant. Well, that's 3 heads a day. So if that restaurant is so busy because they're saying how they had to refuse people, they lost 3 heads a day. Most restaurants I worked in, that you get 2 to 3 no-shows a day, right? You have reservations and something happens, whether somebody gets sick, somebody has an accident, and yes, maybe there's a few people that are assholes and just don't call you and go to another restaurant. It'll happen. But most people do respect your business. So losing 2 heads a day, it's not a new thing. It's not people don't respect their resos anymore. It's because, and people forget that maybe for a while we were so picky with reservations that people felt like they had to put resos in 3-4 restaurants, and we treated them like we were doing them a favor, right? When they got a reservation in a restaurant, instead of remember that we're doing hospitality and that we should be thankful that we're full or that people have to reserve to come to our restaurant. I kind of feel like it's kind of gotten back and to bite them in the ass, and now they're complaining about it. The car salesman who spends 2 hours with somebody, looking at a car, going to do a little road test. He doesn't close every deal, okay? Even when he spends considerable amount of time with the person. So same thing. Yeah, you get a ton of reservations. Some will not show up. Prepare. Okay, be creative. Use social media to fill empty seats. If you're so busy that you pretend that table of 4 or 6 that didn't show up on Saturday at 8:00, you could have filled that 6 times over if you didn't have that reso. Well, you should be able to go on social media right away and say, listen, we have a 6 stop that just didn't show up. Call us now and book it, or first come, first serve, whatever it is you want to do. But if you're so busy usually and it's such a loss for you, you should be able to fill that seat pretty quickly using social media and telling people, you know what, we just had a no-show. We have a 6 stop open. We'll buy you a cocktail if you come in, whatever you want to do to fill that seat if it's, such a loss for you. So don't take it out on your entire clientele too. So when people start saying we're going to start charging, because that restaurant that says they lost 100 covers probably did about 3,000-4,000 covers that month. So you think really that's fair for the 3,900 people who showed up and paid their money and enjoyed themselves for them to be treated like across the industry, right? I find that a lot of people have been very arrogant with their clientele and forget that they are in hospitality. So don't forget who you're there for. You for them, not the other way around. And you should start appreciating the ones that you have maybe and try to bring them in a little more often. And you know what? As far as resos, if it's a large group or you open for them, like you're closed on one day and you decide to open for a group, well, you should ask for a minimum deposit. I've heard a lot of people when they're told that, a lot of restaurants, they say, well, people frown upon that and we're afraid we're going to lose sales. Well, then you complain and bitch when they don't show up. Okay, you know what I frown upon? I frown upon restaurant owners bashing guests in the media, creating Twitter pages to mention people by name who no-showed. Okay, don't be overzealous pricks. Okay, if people are serious, they'll understand a deposit that covers, like, let's say the extra staff for the group. That restaurant that opened up for a group that didn't show up for 20 people, let's say they had 1 or 2 servers on there for 3 hours. Well, it would really be $30 or $60. You could say, you know what? We'll ask you for a $60 deposit because that's what we're going to have to invest in labor to make sure that people are here. And we'll take it off of the final bill. Or we'll reimburse you if it's separate bills. Okay, so if they balk at it, they were not serious and they weren't going to show up, or you have a 50% chance they were going to show up. Be smart, plan ahead. That's it. That's the solution to this problem. Okay, stop making excuses. And if you're honest with people and you say, you know what, we've had no shows in the past and we had situations where we wound up, bringing 4 staff and the group didn't show up. So I need to ask you for a deposit. And the other excuse is that people say, well, if it's not one bill, right? If it's one bill and they make $100 deposit, it's easy to take off the bill at the end. If it's separate bills, then they don't want to do it because they don't want to be responsible for the deposit. Well, you know what? If they make a deposit and it's separate bills, you reimburse the person who made that deposit. It's pretty simple. You got to get creative. You got to be honest with people and people, you know what? Most people, if they're serious about going to your restaurant, understand that you're running a business and there's costs associated with it. So that's not an excuse. That's just the easy way of complaining why your restaurant is not as busy as you want it to be. So some people will not respect their reservations. Most people do. Stop using that as an excuse and bashing your people. Don't forget, it's the hospitality business. Okay, it's not the you business. And the last reason that I noted that the restaurant owners mention is that there's not enough good labor, and or they can't keep the good ones, right? They're good employees. So I got to ask you one thing. Labor is really rough in the restaurant industry. It is very hard to find good employees, and it is honestly even harder to keep them. Because you know what, if they're not pleasing a restaurant, there are so many restaurants that it's easy for them to go somewhere else. One reality, though, is that when you work for an amazing employer, it's very hard to leave that job because there are perks attached to it. Because they've invested in you as a person. How much training do you offer them? Right? How qualified are they? How confident do they feel working for you? What steps do you take to be a great employer? Do your staff get evaluations every 6 months, every year, so they know where they stand, what you expect of them, how much you value them? Do you take time to have chats with them once in a while to see what's right with the business? What do they like? What do they don't like? Do you do internal promotions, right? When it's time to promote somebody, do you do that internally, or do you give people the chance to apply for that so they feel like they have somewhere that they can move to and they feel like they are not stuck in a job for the rest of their lives? Because some people need to have that, right? They need the ability to, as a server, to apply as a manager or as a dishwasher to apply as a server, to know that they can move ahead in life. It's too easy to stick somebody in a position and hope they stay there forever and then complain that they don't stick around. People have aspirations, and if they're in the restaurant business for the long haul, well, maybe we should look at giving them opportunities to move ahead. You do staff meetings where you talk about what's going right, what's going wrong, what needs, where the opportunities are to get better. Staff activities, right? Like a little barbecue in the summer or a little Christmas party in the winter where staff that maybe don't see eye to eye have a chance to have a drink or to chat together and to get to know each other and to strengthen the whole team. Satisfaction surveys to know how the team is going, right? There's a bunch of stuff. If you look, I made a video called 5 Steps to Reducing Turnover where I mentioned specific things that you can do. But yes, there's a shortage of labor, but most restaurant owners do nothing to make their staff happy, to develop them, to keep them in the team, to grow with them, to make sure that they want to stick around, to give them, positive working conditions. Sometimes just with scheduling and making sure that we can accommodate the kind of schedule that they need. And yes, you can't do whatever they want. I totally agree with that. But sometimes if there's a way to help them have a certain quality of life. I'll give you an example. I worked as a manager for a while, and I had 2 days off a week, but my manager would pretty much schedule me on a close. And then I would open on my first day back. So I would finish really late before, let's say I had 1 day off because it would be split days. So I'd close one day, get home around 11, be off the next day. So sleep all morning, get up, do laundry, buy a bit of food, and then I'd open the next day. So, and then I'd have another day off somewhere during the week. So sometimes it's very easy for you to schedule somebody so they do an early shift, finish early, have a night to enjoy it themselves, have their day off, maybe coming a bit late. I'm not saying you can do it all the time. Obviously, it can get very hard to work on a schedule, and you can spend hours upon hours trying to make people. But sometimes being considerate on how you fit people's days off, and trying to accommodate them a little bit, it's going to go such a long way in making them appreciate the job that they have, and especially if you give them training and you give them possibility to move ahead, and that's going to keep them interested in the job, right? Do you treat them as human beings that have dreams and aspirations, or you just treat them like cattle that should be there making you money? If it's the second part for you, then don't wonder why you don't have enough good labor and why you can't keep the good ones. If you want to keep something, if you want to keep the people, make sure you take care of them, and it's going to go a long way to help you having a positive team that's making money for the restaurant. So in closing, as I've mentioned a few times, I think that too many restaurant operators have forgotten that they are in the hospitality business. It's not your guest's job to kiss your butt. It's not their job to be grateful that you exist and that you invested all this money in a restaurant. It's not their job to be impressed that you allow them to visit your establishment. Seriously, stop thinking that it's about you. Okay? You're not God's gift to the restaurant business. Get over yourself. There's not one restaurant in the world that could shut down right now that would affect anyone's life. Yeah, maybe they'd have to change their habits, go to a different restaurant. But I'm not talking about people working there. I'm talking about the guests visiting them. Any restaurant can shut down. You know what? We'll just go to another restaurant. Might be disappointed about it because it was our favorite restaurant. But you know what? In a month, we'll probably not even remember that you existed. So therefore, remember why you are there. Okay? You're there to offer an experience that people choose to spend their hard-earned money in your establishment, money that they've had to work really hard. When you start thinking about how much the average person has to work to buy a cocktail in your restaurant, how long does the average person have to work to buy a dish in your restaurant? Okay? For the average main course, it's probably an hour to an hour and a half of work just to be able to buy that. So when it takes an hour for it to come out, or it's not perfect, or it's a little bit cold, or it's not exactly the way they wanted it, and you take that for granted, when you start respecting how hard people have to work to come spend money in a restaurant, and how hard you have to work to offer an outstanding experience, but how you owe it to them, and it's about them, and you come with an attitude of service that wants to create a great experience and make sure that every guest is happy when they leave. And you know what? If you want to put that to the test, are you willing to stand at the door and ask everybody, how was your meal? How was everything? Is there anything we could have done better? Please let me know. And you're willing to do that with everybody that leaves your restaurant, then you'll be proving to me that you are seriously in the game for the guests, and that you are really willing to have a great restaurant, and you're not just hoping to have a great restaurant. Most people are hoping that regulations helps them, hoping that taxes and fees are not as high, hoping that everybody shows up for their reservation, hoping they keep their best staff, and because I deserve it because I work so hard. Remember that it's as hard, you have to work as hard to operate a good restaurant than you do to operate a bad restaurant. You're not working any harder or it's not because you work less that your restaurant sucks. I know everybody works really hard in their restaurants, but if you forget why you're there and you're not focused on offering an outstanding experience to every guest, then there's a reason why your restaurant is struggling. There's a reason why it's not where you want it to be. And there's a reason why you're finding excuses. So let's stop finding excuses and let's start making sure we impress people every day. Thank you for listening. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.